Welcome to my channel. Tonight, we're diving into 3 creepy true food delivery horror stories. From cursed basements to glitching apps and ghostly customers. These deliveries never should have been made. It was a cold Thursday evening in early December. The kind that lingered with a silent dread in the air. Evan Whitaker, a 29-year-old part-time Uber Eats driver, had just finished his shift at the local auto repair shop and was now spending the evening chasing delivery fares to make ends meet. The roads were wet from a slow drizzle that had begun to taper off, leaving a fog that seemed to coat everything in a ghostly haze. His beat-up 2008 Civic rattled as he pulled into the parking lot of Seoul Garden, a Korean restaurant tucked away in the shadowy corner of an aging strip mall in Elmswood. He checked his app. The name of the customer read simply S. Marin. The address was located on the far edge of town, along a rarely traveled stretch of dense woods that led to a nearly forgotten cul-de-sac known as Hollow Pine Trail. Most drivers avoided that area. Spotty reception, minimal lighting, and it had earned an unspoken reputation over the years for being bad luck. But Evan wasn't superstitious. He'd heard the urban legends, sure, stories of the recluse who vanished in the 90s, the kids who disappeared in 2007, but he chalked them up to small-town lore. The order was nothing unusual. Tteokbokki, galbi, and a single bottle of soju. Evan signed the receipt and loaded the bag onto the passenger seat, placing the soju upright in a cup holder. A wave of warmth radiated from the restaurant as he stepped out, only to be swallowed again by the oppressive cold. He slid into his car, cranked the heater, and began the drive. The app tried to guide him via GPS, but halfway down Broadleaf Road, the signal died. No matter, Evan remembered the way vaguely from a past delivery he'd made months ago. The trees began to grow thicker, lining the 2-lane road like prison bars. Each branch, leafless and gnarled, seemed to reach for his car, tapping against the windows as the wind howled like a distant wail. By the time he reached Hollow Pine Trail, a sense of unease had begun to prick at his spine. The fog had thickened dramatically. His headlights illuminated no more than a dozen feet ahead, and beyond that, nothing but gray soup. He drove slowly, eyes scanning for house numbers. The houses here were strange. Overgrown yards, rusted fences, some windows boarded up like no one had lived there for decades. Finally, he spotted it, 137 Hollow Pine. The house itself was barely visible, cloaked in fog and trees. Its wooden siding was weather-worn and sagging, and only one window on the second floor glowed faintly. The porch light flickered. He pulled into the gravel driveway, the crunch of stones beneath his tires oddly loud in the stillness. There were no other cars in sight, no signs of life, just the faint creak of wind chimes swaying listlessly in the air. Evan grabbed the bag and walked to the porch. The wooden steps moaned beneath his weight. He rang the bell. A long, echoing chime rang out, then silence. He waited. 30 seconds passed. Then a full minute. He knocked. Still nothing. He pulled out his phone to call the number listed, but the screen showed no signal. He considered leaving the bag on the porch and walking away, but something in the pit of his stomach told him not to. Just then, he heard it. A whisper of movement from behind the door. Not footsteps, not speech, but a kind of sliding sound, like something being dragged slowly along the floor. Then the door creaked open, barely a crack. Through the gap, Evan could just make out a sliver of a face. Pale skin, an eye that didn't blink, long dark strands of hair, and something else, movement behind the person, but not in any direction he could follow. It was like shadows sliding over shadows, writhing independently. A voice came from within, high-pitched, soft, and toneless. "You're late." Evan blinked. Sorry. GPS died. "I have your order. Bring it in." He hesitated. Protocol strictly discouraged entering homes. But then again, he couldn't just leave the food with the door barely open. And maybe the customer was sick or disabled. Maybe that explained the strange tone and stillness. Against his better judgment, he stepped into the house. The smell hit him first. Not rot, not mildew, something in between. Earthy, coppery, and sweet, like decaying flowers mixed with iron. The house was dim, with only a lamp lit in the hallway ahead, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper curling at the edges, and picture frames that had been turned to face the wall. The woman, if that's what she was, stepped back into the gloom, beckoning him silently. "Just leave it on the dining table," she said, disappearing around the corner. Evan walked in cautiously. The floor beneath him was sticky in places, though it didn't make any visible sense. No spilled drinks, just tacky resistance. The dining table was covered in an old lace cloth, yellowed with age. He set the food down and turned to leave. But she was standing in the hallway again, watching him. "Do you want your tip?" That's not necessary," Evan said quickly, already unnerved. She stepped forward. Her gait was odd, as though she didn't quite bend her knees when she walked. In her hand, she held something small, a folded envelope. "It's cash," she said. "You're very brave to come here." Evan took the envelope cautiously. Her fingers brushed his, and they were cold, ice cold. Not in the normal way, not like someone who'd been outside. This was the kind of cold that suggested something entirely different. Deep cold. The shadows in the hallway seemed to shiver. He stepped back. "Thanks, I should be going." Then she smiled. That smile was all wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. Her lips didn't quite stretch properly, as though she'd never learned how to mimic the gesture, and was doing it based on some old photo she'd once seen. The effect was horrifying. "You should go," she whispered. "Before they notice you." Evan didn't wait for clarification. He turned and bolted for the door, slamming it behind him. The night was now utterly silent, the fog somehow thicker, the trees leaning just a little closer than before. He jumped in his car and fumbled with the keys. The engine coughed once, then twice, before finally turning over. As he drove, the headlights illuminated something that made his blood run cold. There were footprints on the driveway. Dozens of them. Bare, wet, and facing toward the house. None leading away. Evan didn't look back. He didn't stop until he hit the edge of town and reception returned. His phone vibrated immediately. Missed calls. Texts. But what caught his eye was the Uber Eats app. The delivery status was marked. Cancelled. He frowned, slowing the car just a little. That couldn't be right. He completed it. He had the envelope. The customer spoke to him. What? He tapped the customer's name. S. Marin. Nothing came up. The order history ended with the one before Hollow Pine Trail. He pulled over, hands trembling now. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice. He unfolded it. A handwritten note. In shaky, cramped writing, it read, "Thank you. Don't come back." He stared at the note, heart racing, then noticed the back of the paper had something printed faintly across it. Ink that had bled through. He turned it over. It was an obituary. Samantha Marin, age 24, died tragically in a fire at her family home, 137 Hollow Pine Trail, on December 8, 1997. The date? Exactly 28 years ago. To the day. Evan didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. He sat in his apartment, all the lights on, the envelope and its note lying on the coffee table before him like some ancient curse. The obituary, now smoothed and refolded, refused to leave his mind. His heart pounded every time he blinked, expecting to see her standing in the doorway, smiling that wrong smile. By morning, he was exhausted, but curiosity had begun to take root, burrowing into his paranoia. He couldn't help but search online, typing Samantha Marin, 137 Hollow Pine Trail, and 1997 fire into every search engine he could think of. It didn't take long. A few scattered results showed up. Old newspaper scans, a blog post about haunted houses in Elmswood, one PDF from a now-defunct paranormal magazine. The story was tragically simple. A house fire, late at night. The Marin family of 5. Cause undetermined. Rumors abounded. Faulty wiring. Candles left unattended. Arson. But the detail that caught his breath was this. Only one body was recovered. Samantha's. The others? Never found. No sign of escape.
No trace.
Just gone. And the fire had been strange. According to one firefighter's quote in a Yellowed article, it didn't behave normally. It stayed in certain rooms and skipped others. It was like it knew where to go. That alone made Evan's skin crawl. But what chilled him to his core was a grainy black and white photo in the article. A family picture. Mr. and Mrs. Marin, Samantha, and her 2 younger brothers. Samantha's eyes. They looked the same as they had the night before. Staring. Blank. And that same faint hint of a too wide smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Like she knew something the others didn't. Evan slammed the laptop shut. He told himself it wasn't real. That maybe someone had faked the obituary. Or maybe he was just overworked, sleep-deprived, and hallucinating. Still, when he picked up another delivery shift that night, he made damn sure to blacklist Hollow Pine Trail. He didn't want to even drive near that place again. And for a few days everything was fine. Until he got the next notification. It was Friday a week later. Evan had just finished dropping off a pizza on Parkhurst Avenue when his phone buzzed. Another request incoming. He didn't even look at the name. Just tapped accept on reflex. Big mistake. As he glanced at the screen, he saw it. Delivery to 137 Hollow Pine Trail. Customer S. Marin. Evan slammed on the brakes, heart hammering. He canceled the order. The app confirmed cancellation. He stared at the address in disbelief. Was someone messing with him? Then his phone buzzed again. Another delivery request. Same address. Same name. He declined. Another. He closed the app. It buzzed again, this time a text message. From an unknown number. Don't ignore me. He stared at it, finger hovering over the power button. I tipped you. The message popped up on his lock screen, taunting him. Then another. You didn't say thank you. And then a photo. Evan's breath caught in his throat. It was his car. Parked. Right now. Taken from behind. He spun in his seat, eyes scanning the street. Nobody. Nothing but a few parked cars and leafless trees. Another photo came in. It was of him. From the back seat. He dropped the phone and flung himself out of the car, spinning around with a shout. No one. He opened the back door. Empty. The phone buzzed again. Hands trembling, he picked it up. See you soon. He didn't work another shift for a month after that. Evan tried to go back to his old life. Auto repair during the day, avoiding any mention of food delivery. But something had changed. Shadows in his apartment seemed deeper now. The corners of mirrors felt like they watched him. And sometimes, just sometimes, he swore he could hear the doorbell ring in the middle of the night. When he checked, no one was there. One night, desperate for normalcy, he went out with some friends to a bar downtown. He drank too much, laughed too loud, and for a moment, forgot about Samantha Marin. Until he stepped outside for some air and found a paper bag waiting on the hood of his car.
Uber Eats branding.
A single receipt stapled to the top. The name? For Evan Whitaker. There was no listed address. He stood there, the chill slicing through his jacket, heart thudding. His friends called for him. Hey, you coming? He nodded slowly, leaving the bag untouched. That night he dreamt of fire. The dreams became more frequent, always the same. A long hallway filled with smoke. A child's laughter echoing through the dark. A figure watching from the top of the stairs. And then flames closing in on all sides. He would wake up drenched in sweat, his sheets tangled around him like restraints. Desperate, Evan reached out to a local paranormal group online. Elmwood Investigations, they called themselves. Mostly hobbyists, he assumed. But one of them, a woman named Kendra, agreed to meet with him. They sat in a cafe near the university. She was in her early 30s, sharp-eyed and clearly skeptical, but willing to listen. Evan told her everything. The delivery, the house, the cancelled order, the obituary. She didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled out a small notebook and jotted notes while he spoke. "You're not the first," she finally said. Evan blinked. "What?" She nodded. "There have been others. Mostly gig workers. One DoorDash guy disappeared 2 years ago. No leads. Another Uber Eats driver ended up in a psychiatric facility after swearing he delivered to a burned house full of ghosts. No one believed him." Evan's blood turned to ice. "But why me?" he asked. Kendra looked him in the eye. "You went inside. That matters. You entered her domain. That's an invitation." Evan felt the walls of the cafe close in. "What do I do?" Kendra hesitated, then scribbled something on a slip of paper and slid it across the table. It was a name and an address. "Old woman, Mrs. LeClaire. Used to live on Hollow Pine Trail. She might know something, but be careful. She's not entirely there anymore." The house was small, hidden behind a tall gate of twisted iron. Wind chimes made of bone, or what looked like bone, clinked in the breeze. Mrs. LeClaire was ancient. Her skin looked like tissue, her eyes clouded but sharp. She didn't smile when Evan introduced himself. In fact, she barely spoke at all until he mentioned Samantha Marin. Then she laughed, dry, bitter. "Too late," she whispered. "Too late for what?" Evan asked. "She picks them, the ones who cross her threshold. You went in. You accepted something." Evan swallowed. "What does she want?" Mrs. LeClaire leaned in close. Her breath smelled of ash and old cloth. "She wants you with her." A long pause. "Forever." She closed the door. Evan stood there for a long time before leaving. That night, he returned to his apartment and found every light bulb shattered. The TV flickered to static. His laptop, when opened, displayed a single message on the screen: "Come back." On December 8th, exactly 1 year after the delivery, Evan returned to 137 Hollow Pine Trail. Not out of bravery, out of necessity. He was being haunted, stalked, erased. His Uber Eats account was suspended with no explanation. His auto shop fired him after he missed too many days, claiming he vanished for a week, though he had no memory of that time. He had nowhere else to go. The house looked the same. The porch still creaked. The light in the upstairs window still burned. He stepped inside. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The food bag still on the table, rotted, molding. A soft sound came from upstairs. A lullaby. He climbed the steps slowly, each one groaning under his weight. At the top, the hallway stretched longer than seemed possible. And at the end, a door stood ajar. He pushed it open. Inside, Samantha sat on the floor, cross-legged, her eyes fixed on the far wall where flames danced, but cast no heat. "I knew you'd come back," she said. Evan stepped into the room. Behind him, the door closed, and then everything changed. Time seemed to twist the moment the door shut behind Evan. The sound of it closing wasn't just a door clicking. It was like a vault ceiling, a final lock on his old world. He stood frozen, staring into the room, his eyes adjusting slowly to the flickering firelight that danced on the cracked, peeling wallpaper. But the flames on the wall weren't reflections from a fireplace or lamp. They shimmered unnaturally, casting no glow on the floor or ceiling. They were moving of their own volition, looping endlessly across the surface like a film projected onto reality. Samantha sat motionless on the floor in front of the wall, legs crossed, her hands resting delicately on her knees. Her hair was long and tangled now, matted in places with something dark. Her dress, a faded white nightgown, looked burned at the edges, blackened and curling. She didn't blink. "I waited," she said. Evan's voice caught in his throat. What do you want from me?" She turned her head, slowly, mechanically. "You came back." That's all I needed. No, he said, stepping back toward the door. No, I didn't come back for you. I came to end this, to stop whatever this is. You can't stop it, she whispered. It's already begun. The walls began to tremble. The air shimmered like heat waves, though the room remained bitterly cold. Evan backed into the door, reached for the knob, and twisted. Nothing. It wouldn't turn. He yanked harder. The knob spun freely, like it had detached from the internal mechanism. The door was sealed. Samantha stood, moving like a marionette with tangled strings. Do you know what it feels like? She asked. To burn and never die? Evan shook his head, panic surging. To feel the flames over and over. To scream, but no one hears. To watch your family vanish. But you stay. Always stay. Because someone needs to open the door. Someone needs to answer. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for a moment, a flash of something human flickered behind her expression. Pain, sorrow, longing. Then it was gone. She smiled again. I answered the door for the wrong person. And now, I wait for someone to take my place. Evan's knees buckled.
No.
You can't do this. I didn't ask for this. You entered. You took the tip. You accepted the gift. The envelope? He asked. That was a trick. She tilted her head. Doesn't matter. He scanned the room desperately. There was no furniture, no window, just bare walls and that impossible fire. The floor groaned beneath his feet as he stepped closer to Samantha. There has to be a way out, he whispered. There is, she said. You take someone else's place. Evan froze. What? You invite another. You deliver it. The food, the envelope, the invitation. Once they step through the door, you go free. His stomach churned. That's sick. Her expression didn't change. It's fair. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shimmered. The room began to stretch, the corners elongating. And behind Samantha, the wall with the fire opened. A narrow corridor revealed itself, composed of flickering flames, smoky figures frozen in silent screams lining its edges. The smell of burning hair and flesh filled Evan's nostrils, making him gag. You can stay with me, she said softly. Forever. Or, you choose someone else. She held out her hand. A phone appeared in it, his phone. The Uber Eats app was open. A blank delivery screen. One line blinking. Enter recipient name. His fingers trembled. This isn't real, he said. It's not real. Samantha stepped closer, and the corridor behind her let out a howling wind, filled with distant, tortured screams. Make your choice, she said. He didn't remember leaving the house. Not truly. 1 minute he was in that room, the walls closing in with fire and horror. The next, he was standing on the sidewalk outside 137 Hollow Pine, clutching his phone, the fog thicker than ever. No car, no light, just the phone screen still open to the app, the prompt blinking, enter recipient name. He stood there until morning. Eventually, he made his way to the road, flagged down a passing truck, and said he was lost. The driver didn't ask questions, just gave him a ride into town and dropped him at a gas station. Evan didn't talk to anyone for days. He ignored calls, unplugged his TV, avoided mirrors. Every shadow in his apartment moved just a little too long. Every flicker of light from the hallway outside felt like someone watching. But the app never closed. It never let him close it. And every night, the message returned, enter recipient name. One night, out of desperation, Evan opened a bottle of whiskey and stared at the screen for hours. His mind spun in circles. He thought about the mechanics, the rules. Invite another. Deliver the envelope. Let them enter. He could be free. He didn't want to do it. But every time he closed his eyes, he was back in the room. With her. With that endless flame. With the screams echoing in his head. And so, 2 weeks later, Evan did something he'd never forgive himself for. He signed up a friend for Uber Eats, David, his old coworker from the auto shop. He texted him casually. Hey, you still delivering food for extra cash? Yeah, sometimes. There's a good tip spot. Super quiet area. Good pay. Want me to send it your way? Sure. Bro, appreciate it. Evan stared at his screen for a long time before typing David's name into the recipient field. The app buzzed. Confirmed. Within seconds, a new order popped up. Evan blinked in horror. Pickup. Soul Garden. Delivery. 137 Hollow Pine Trail. And beneath it, delivery assigned, David L. He tried to cancel it, tried to stop it, but the buttons were locked. Grayed out. Unresponsive. He called David. No answer. He called again. And again. No answer. Finally, an hour later, he got a single text back. What the hell was that? I got to the house and no one came to the door. Then my app glitched and the order vanished. Weird neighborhood, man. Don't send me there again. Evan felt his knees go weak. It hadn't worked. Or had it? Another text came in. By the way, thanks for the tip. Someone left an envelope on my windshield. Kinda creepy, but hey, cash is cash. LOL. Evan dropped his phone. His head throbbed. It had begun. That night, Evan dreamed of the fire again. But this time, he wasn't watching it from the hallway. He was inside it, trapped in the corridor of flames, screaming with the others, reaching out for someone to save him. And somewhere ahead, Samantha stood watching, smiling, waiting for her next delivery. Evan didn't sleep the next night, nor the next. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw David. Not as he was, but how he might become. Burned, twisted, calling out to him from the corridor of flames. The guilt was unbearable. Yet the app remained open on his phone, as if waiting for his next victim, taunting him with its quiet prompt, enter recipient name. He never typed another. But it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. Within a week, David stopped responding to messages. At first, Evan thought it was coincidence. Maybe his friend had just gotten busy. Maybe he was ghosting him after that strange delivery. But then he checked social media. David's accounts had gone dark. No posts, no story updates, not even a sign-in. A few days later, Evan drove by the auto shop where David used to work. The place had closed down, boarded up. The help wanted sign in the window was splintered, as if someone had scratched at it with nails. He parked outside and asked a neighboring business owner, an older man who ran a paint supply store. Shop's been empty for months, the man said. No one's worked there since August. But my friend, he was just working here last week. The man frowned. Kid, I've been here 15 years. No one set foot in that garage since last summer. They found something in the office. Left in a rush. Evan's hands went cold. What did they find? The man hesitated, then said, a bag. Food bag. Moldy like it had been sitting there for years. Nobody claimed it. Evan turned and walked away, his legs numb beneath him. He hadn't sent David to the house a week ago. He'd sent him there months ago. Or perhaps he always had. He began to see shadows during the day. Not the kind cast by light, but ones that moved against it. They skittered across walls, slithered under doors, rippled across glass without any source. At first, he told himself it was stress, sleep deprivation, the guilt. But then the shadows began to whisper. They didn't say words. Not at first. Just sounds. Footsteps. Crying. Soft crackles of fire. And then, in the middle of a quiet afternoon, a voice. Thank you. He jumped from the couch, his phone flying from his lap. He stared around the apartment. Empty. He picked up the phone. The app was still open. The prompt still blinking. Enter recipient name. Evan smashed the phone on the floor. Glass splintered, sparks jumped. It flickered and went dark. Finally. But the blinking didn't stop. Continued, burned into the black screen. The words were inside the device now. Not software. Memory. Debt. Contract. He wrapped the phone in a towel and threw it in the dumpster behind the building. Then he went inside, packed a bag, and left town. He ended up in Pennsylvania, a tiny town called Mercer Hollow, population barely scraping 1,000. He rented a room in an old motel with wood-paneled walls and musty curtains. Cash only. The kind of place people go to disappear. The first night was calm. He slept. Truly slept.
No dreams.
No fire. Just darkness and silence. But when he woke, the air was heavy. The room stank faintly of smoke. He checked his bag. Tucked inside the folds of his hoodie was something he hadn't packed. An envelope, identical to the one from that first night. No name on the front.
No seal.
Just a folded flap. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. It showed a house. Not 137 Hollow Pine Trail, but somewhere new. A small, colonial-style home. Isolated on a hillside, trees surrounding it like guards. On the back of the photo, scribbled in faded ink, "She's expanding." That night he took a walk through the town. It was quiet, peaceful. He almost convinced himself it was over, until he passed the diner. Its sign flickered briefly. The open light went dark for a moment, and when it came back it said Soul Garden. Evan staggered backward, blinking. A man walked past him without noticing, heading into the restaurant. The sign was normal again. Back to Mercer Hollow Diner. He stood frozen for several minutes, and then he saw her, across the street, in the second-story window of the bookstore. Samantha, watching, smiling. She wasn't bound to that house anymore. He had delivered the curse to someone else, and it had grown. Evan fled again. Over the next year, he drifted from place to place. Nebraska, Missouri, Oregon. Sometimes sleeping in his car, sometimes in shelters. He never stayed long. And yet no matter where he went, she followed. In subtle ways. A woman on a bus with long dark hair and motionless eyes. A child humming the lullaby from the dream, even though she was wearing headphones. Receipts left in his pockets, scrawled with addresses he'd never been to. And always the envelope. It would appear. Under his pillow. In his shoe. Taped to his rearview mirror. The final time he found it inside his mouth when he woke. Carefully folded, damp with saliva. The message inside was only 3 words. Pay it forward. In Minneapolis, Evan snapped. He found an old motel with no security cameras and rented a room under a false name. He opened his laptop, created a new account.
Uber Eats.
Driver. He logged in, typed the address of a house across town. A stranger's house. A name picked at random from a phone book. L. Kern. The app accepted it instantly. An order generated automatically. Pickup. Soul Garden. Evan didn't ask questions. He just drove. The bag was waiting for him at the back door of a nondescript building that didn't exist on any GPS inside. The food. The envelope. He delivered it. The house was dark. He rang the bell, left the bag, and ran. For a few weeks, the shadows receded. No fire.
No whispers.
Just silence. He moved on. To Kansas. Then Colorado. Tried to start over. But guilt is a ghost of its own. One night he checked the news. A house in Minneapolis had burned down. Cause unknown. 1 casualty. Leah Kern, age 32. Only her body was recovered. Neighbors claimed to have seen her open the door for a delivery. Then nothing but flames. That night, Evan received a call. No number. Just static. He almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of him. He placed the phone to his ear. Silence. Then, "You're learning." The line went dead. He sat in the dark, the fire inside him reigniting. She would never stop. She had made him part of it. A cog in the machinery. A courier of the curse. And now, he understood. It wasn't about ending it. It was about continuing it. It was Christmas Eve, 2 years after Evan Whitaker's first delivery to 137 Hollow Pine Trail. The snow fell in thick, silent sheets, blanketing the small town of Wexford, Idaho. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where neighbors left their doors unlocked and street lamps buzzed faintly like lullabies. Children built snowmen in their front yards, their laughter echoing softly down the lanes. And Evan stood across from the house at 23 Helmer Drive, watching. He wore a gray hoodie, the drawstrings pulled tight around his face, and thick gloves over hands that had begun to tremble with something far deeper than cold. His breath puffed in plumes, disappearing into the night. In his left hand, a brown paper delivery bag with the familiar red lettering, Soul Garden. In his right, a sealed envelope. He had stopped trying to remember how many deliveries he had made now. 7, maybe 8. Some accepted, some rejected, some disappeared entirely. But it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't delivering food. He was delivering her. The first time it happened, it nearly broke him. But over time, the guilt dulled. The nightmares became background noise. And Samantha, she became something else. Not a ghost. Not a girl, but a force, a hunger, a system with one rule: deliver or die. Evan walked up the steps of the porch, the wood creaking under his boots. The wreath on the front door swayed slightly in the breeze. Inside, he could hear a faint hum of holiday music. Silent Night, slowed down just enough to sound sinister. He rang the bell, waited. A man in his late 40s opened the door. Hair thinning, glasses perched on a tired face. Yes. Delivery, Evan said, holding out the bag. The man frowned. I didn't order anything. Evan didn't speak. He held out the envelope. The man hesitated. There must be a mistake. Evan said nothing. And slowly, as if entranced, the man reached for the envelope. His fingers brushed Evan's. Cold. Electric. The air changed. The world tilted. And Evan felt something shift. Just beneath the skin of reality. As the door closed behind him, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had seen it all before. 3 nights later, he returned to the same street. 23 Helmer was dark. Windows shattered. The front porch scorched, blackened around the edges. No sign of police tape.
No neighbor staring. No reporters.
Just another forgotten ruin. Another address crossed off the map. Another delivery. Completed. But then something changed. It began as a whisper in his ear. Not hers. Not Samantha. But another voice. Lower. Deeper. Masculine. A voice like cracking wood and crumbling earth. You're not alone. Evan stopped in the middle of a grocery store, heart pounding. He looked around. No one. But the voice came again. You're not the only courier. He dropped his basket, ran out into the snow. That night, someone left a note on his car. Handwritten. In blocky, childlike letters. We're many. We deliver. Taped beneath it, a photo. 4 men and 1 woman standing beside a van. All holding paper bags, all wearing the same dead stare. And behind them, Samantha, standing in the shadows, smiling. Evan realized then that he had never been the first, only the latest. She had dozens, maybe hundreds, and they weren't just delivering food. They were spreading her reach, across states, across cities, across countries. Every envelope was a thread in a vast, invisible web. Every delivery, a portal. Every name entered into the app, a nail in another coffin. And Evan had become efficient, effective. He was promoted in a sense, because now he didn't need the app anymore. The deliveries came to him. One night, in Tucson, he awoke with a list of names written across his chest in black ink. No memory of how they got there. He picked 3. 3 more houses burned within a week. He started leaving the envelopes in public places, benches, bus seats, restroom counters. Each one with a different name inside. Each one an invitation. He watched the news. Fires, disappearances, sudden madness,
No patterns. No suspects.
just ashes. And then, on a night in March, Evan returned to Elmswood. The town hadn't changed. 137 Hollow Pine Trail still stood, though the fog was thicker now, like the trees themselves were hiding it from the world. He approached the house slowly, the envelope tucked under his arm, a bag swinging from his side. The porch welcomed him with its familiar groan. The door opened before he knocked. She stood there, exactly as before, hair dark and tangled, eyes blank, dress burned at the edges. "Welcome back," she whispered. Evan stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The corridor stretched once more. But this time he didn't resist. He followed her into the flame. They sat together in the room with the burning walls. No words, only understanding. And as the floor beneath them began to shimmer and melt, Samantha leaned toward him. "You're ready now," she said. "For what?" he asked. "To take my place." He froze. "What?" She smiled softly this time. Not cruel, not mocking, almost relieved. "You've done the work. You've built the route. You've spread the fire. But it always ends this way." She placed the envelope in his lap. He looked down. It was blank. And inside, a mirror. Just a single shard, barely large enough to show his eye. He stared into it, and the flame took him. Somewhere, a delivery driver accepts a request. The app reads, "Soul Garden deliver to 137 Hollow Pine Trail." The driver shrugs. Another fare. Another tip. They don't notice the glitch in the customer name. How it flashes for a second between S. Marin and E. Whitaker. They don't see the envelope yet, but they will. Soon. And when they do, they'll hear the voice, "You're late." The order came in at 2:37 a.m., just as Caleb Jordan was about to call it a night. He'd been driving for nearly 6 hours already, mostly delivering fast food, late-night snacks, and the occasional strange request. That night had been heavy on the strange. A couple who ordered 10 large fries and nothing else. A customer who asked him to sing "Happy Birthday" through the door cam, and someone who paid him $50 cash just to hand over a milkshake. But this one felt off. The customer name read, Zane, all caps, no last name. The address was located on Crosshaven Lane, a cul-de-sac on the edge of the industrial zone outside Denver, Colorado. Caleb had never been there before. He tapped accept without thinking, then blinked at the order details. 2 cheeseburgers, a single bottle of water, no contact delivery instructions. Leave food on the 3rd step. Do not knock. Do not speak. Do not look inside the window. He reread the instructions twice. A joke? Sometimes customers pulled weird stunts. TikTok pranks, live streams, whatever. But this felt more clinical. More like a ritual. He debated canceling, but then noticed the tip. $125. Caleb stared at the number. His highest tip that night had been $9. This would more than make up for a dry evening. So he headed to the pickup spot, a 24-hour burger joint downtown. The guy at the drive-through window handed him the bag with a smirk. "Late-night hunger?" he asked. Caleb shrugged. "Guess so." The guy hesitated. "You sure you're going to Crosshaven? Place gives me the creeps." Caleb tried to laugh it off. "It's just a street." The guy didn't respond, just slid the window shut. 10 minutes later, Caleb was driving down back roads, past empty warehouses and cold storage buildings with no lights. The streets were silent, lined with parked trucks and broken lampposts. Fog had begun to roll in low across the pavement, pooling like smoke along the asphalt. His GPS dimmed briefly, recalibrated, then displayed the destination ahead, 112 Crosshaven Lane. The house was unexpected. Among steel buildings and chain-link fences, it stood alone, an old Victorian-style structure, utterly out of place. It looked like it had been picked up from another century and dropped here by mistake. Its white paint was flaking, the porch sagging in places, and its windows were tall, thin, and black as pitch. No lights, no signs of movement. Caleb parked in front of the overgrown yard and stepped out. The cold hit him like a wall, unnaturally cold. He zipped up his hoodie and grabbed the bag. He remembered the instructions. Third step. No knocking. No speaking. Don't look inside. Okay, he whispered to himself. Just drop and bounce. As he approached the porch, the silence pressed in. Even his footsteps felt muffled. The third step groaned beneath him as he bent to place the bag. Something moved behind the nearest window. A flutter. Quick. Silent. He froze. His head turned instinctively. Then he stopped himself. No. The instructions. He shut his eyes tightly, counted to 3, and forced himself to stand, back away, and walk to the car. As he reached for the door handle, his phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. Thank you, Caleb. He blinked. The app had never shared his name with customers. It was possible, but rare. Before he could respond, another text appeared. Would you like another? He stared at the message, heart racing. Yes, no, the two options blinked beneath the previous message. Was this some kind of new app feature? He didn't remember anything like it. Curiosity beat caution. He tapped yes. Immediately, the screen changed. New instructions incoming. Do not speak. Do not knock. Do not disobey. Then a new address. Caleb stared. It wasn't in Denver. It wasn't even in Colorado. It was in Wyoming, over 4 hours away. And yet, the payout? $750. He sat in his car, stunned. This was absurd. Impossible. A glitch? Then his phone rang. No caller ID. Against his better judgment, he answered. A voice whispered, "Drive." He dropped the phone. Continued buzzing. Eventually, it stopped. The address remained on the screen. After 20 minutes of sitting in silence, Caleb started the engine. The highway was nearly empty. For the first hour, Caleb tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was some high-concept scavenger hunt. Maybe a company promo. Maybe a dream. But the longer he drove, the darker things got. His GPS flickered repeatedly. Radio stations went silent or played static-laced sermons. At one point, he saw a figure standing by the roadside. A tall man, unmoving, facing his car. When Caleb blinked, the figure was gone. Finally, around 6:00 a.m., the destination loomed ahead. 92 Hollow Creek Drive. An ancient farmhouse. Roof collapsed in parts. Porch sagging. Yard overrun with dead weeds. A second bag of food sat on the passenger seat. Caleb didn't remember picking it up, but there it was, still warm, and beside it an envelope. He hadn't noticed that before either. He parked. Read the new instructions. Leave food on porch. Knock once. Do not stay. Caleb approached slowly. The front steps were brittle. He placed the bag on the porch, careful not to look at the door. Then, hesitating, he raised his hand and knocked. Once. A hollow, echoing sound. As he turned to leave, he heard it. A voice, soft and childlike. Why are you doing this? He froze. Then, louder. He can't leave. The door creaked behind him. He ran. Sprinted to the car. Started it in a panic and tore down the road. The sun was rising but offered no warmth. And when he checked the passenger seat, the bag and envelope were gone. Later, at a gas station, he asked the cashier about Hollow Creek. The man gave him a weird look. That place has been empty 30 years. Caleb swallowed. No one lives there? Burned down in '89. Old man sealed the land after his kid disappeared. You sure you were at 92? Caleb didn't answer, just paid and left. Back home, he deleted the Uber Eats app, broke his phone, bought a new one, started fresh. He figured it was over, but the envelopes started appearing. In his mailbox, in his glove compartment, once inside his shoe, each one with an address, each one offering more money. and every time he ignored them, he heard footsteps in his apartment. Water would turn on by itself. The smell of burning meat would seep in from nowhere, and he'd get texts from unknown numbers. You disobeyed. Zane is waiting. No contact does not mean no connection. One day, a friend of Caleb's, a fellow driver named Rosa, vanished after accepting a strange delivery. When Caleb checked her phone records, he found one text from an unlisted number. Just a name, Zane. Caleb has been driving ever since. He doesn't choose where he goes anymore. The instructions come. He follows them, because the alternative is worse. Sometimes he passes a mirror and sees someone else's reflection. Sometimes, when he parks, he swears someone climbs into the back seat. And every delivery, no matter the address, has the same instructions now. No contact, no eye contact, no questions. But the whispers grow louder. And he knows one day soon, he'll be asked to deliver to his own door. Caleb no longer had a home. That was one of the first rules they never told you. Once you start delivering for Zane, your address becomes fluid, meaningless. The concept of a place you return to fades, like fog dissipating under sunlight. He lived out of his car now. A 2012 Dodge Dart with a cracked windshield and a driver's side window that refused to roll down all the way. He'd abandoned Denver weeks ago, tracing a route that he never planned, letting the assignments lead him across state lines and through time zones, into towns not found on modern maps. He didn't even remember when he last spoke to someone who wasn't on the other side of a door, because the deliveries had changed. They no longer came through an app. Now they arrived. The passenger seat was often empty when he went to sleep and full when he woke up. Hot food in branded packaging that didn't exist, paired with instructions handwritten in calligraphy so fine and slanted it looked like it had been printed by an antique typewriter. The rules were always different. Sometimes he was to leave the bag in a mailbox. Other times, place it in the freezer unit behind an abandoned diner. Once, disturbingly, he was told to hang it from the oak tree by the creek at 3:13 a.m. and ring the attached bell 4 times. No more, no less. He'd made the mistake of ringing it 5 times. That night, he woke up in the back seat of his car, several states away, with dried blood in his nostrils and a lock of his own hair missing. No note.
No bag. No explanation.
Just a new delivery, and a new warning. Caleb kept a journal now. Not because he hoped someone would read it, but because writing things down helped keep his mind from dissolving. The rules were clearer on paper, safer somehow. In one entry he wrote, "There's a hierarchy. Zane is the first, the master dispatcher. But there are others. Givers, takers, collectors. I think the food is just a disguise. I think it's not even food. Once I looked in the bag. Just once. It was breathing. I don't think I'm supposed to remember that." He'd also started noticing other drivers. The first time was in Amarillo. He was dropping off a bag behind a shuttered Greyhound station when he saw another car idling in the distance. Pale blue sedan. Driver inside, staring at him. At first he thought it was coincidence. But the next day in Tulsa he saw the same car. Then again in Wichita. Each time closer. Each time still staring. The driver never exited the vehicle. Just sat, waiting, watching, and then it was gone. For weeks. Until one night, Caleb received a delivery envelope addressed not to a location, but to a person. A name he recognized instantly. Jace R., his best friend from college. Someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly 7 years. The instructions were written in blood-red ink. Deliver the envelope. No food. No package. Just this. Speak only one word, remember. Then walk away. The payout? $2, $500. Caleb stared at the name, the address in Omaha, and the thick envelope in his hand. He considered running. He considered destroying it. But something in the car changed. The lights flickered. The radio turned on. Static and a voice beneath it. Low. Repetitive. Deliver. 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 He drove. Jace's house was small, clean, suburban. A white fence. blue mailbox. A red bicycle leaned against the garage. A toy dinosaur sat half-buried in the flower bed. Caleb approached the door and rang the bell. Jace opened it seconds later, wearing an old hoodie and pajama pants. His eyes squinted at first, then widened in recognition. Caleb? Holy shit. Is that you? What are you? Caleb held out the envelope. Remember. Jace looked confused. What? Remember? Caleb repeated, then turned and walked back to his car, ignoring Jace's shouts, his footsteps. He drove until the shouting faded behind him. 3 days later, Jace was declared missing. Local news mentioned last sightings. Descriptions.
No suspects.
Caleb knew better, because on the 4th day, he woke up and found a new journal in the glove compartment. Not his handwriting, not his pen, not his thoughts, but filled with pages, page after page, describing Jace's memories, dreams, regrets. Some Caleb had never known, others he had forgotten, all scrawled in fine red ink. At the end of the book, a single page. He remembered. Thank you. Next time, you will be the one to remember. Caleb burned the journal that night, but it didn't matter. The entries started showing up on the walls of his motel rooms, scrawled on bathroom mirrors, inked into his dreams. The pale blue sedan returned in Kansas City. This time, the driver stepped out. It was a woman, mid-30s, long black hair, eyes pale as fog. She approached Caleb silently and handed him a bag with a note stapled to the side. Partner route. Dual delivery required. Do not diverge. Do not speak to her. If either fails, both pay. She walked back to her car and drove off. An hour later, the first destination appeared on Caleb's windshield. Not his phone. Not his GPS literally across the glass, as if written by frost. He followed it. Through tunnels he didn't recognize. Down streets with no names. Over bridges that spanned fog, not water. The drop location was an old elementary school. Decrepit. Condemned. The windows gaped open like mouths. He placed his bag beside the school's front steps and rang a small bell nailed into a crumbling beam. Across the street, the pale blue sedan did the same. She did not look at him. He did not speak. At the next stop, she handed him her bag, and he handed her his. They both drove to different houses on opposite ends of the block. As he stepped onto the porch, Caleb finally spoke. Not out loud, but to himself. I want out. The wind answered with a sigh that wasn't wind. Inside the bag, he heard something shift. A breath. A heartbeat. He dropped the bag and ran. He woke up the next morning in a different city. In the driver's seat. No memory of the night before. A receipt was stapled to his coat. Route completed. Delivery successful. Disobedience noted. And beneath that, you are still employed. He tried to scream. No sound came out. Caleb doesn't speak much anymore. His voice has grown hoarse from disuse. The deliveries continue. Sometimes he sees the woman in the sedan. Sometimes others. Once, a child no older than 12 dropped a bag on a doorstep and vanished into shadow. It's a system now. A network. And Zane? Zane is only the first dispatcher. There are more. Names whispered in the static. Faces seen in reflections. And every once in a while, Caleb catches sight of himself in the mirror, and something is missing. An expression. The thought. A memory. Taken in exchange for payment. For obedience. And always the final instruction. Do not look inside the window, because once you do, it looks back. Caleb had rules now. Not just the ones scribbled on napkins or printed on the sides of delivery bags. His own rules. The kind forged from bitter experience and seared into his bones. 1. Never deliver after 3:33 a.m. 2. Never park facing the address. Always reverse in. 3. Never make eye contact with children. They remember. 4. If a customer tips in advance, ask nothing. 5. If the food breathes, stop breathing back. 6. The blue sedan is not an ally. He wrote them in every notebook he carried, taped them to his dashboard, etched them into the inside of his trunk with a pocket knife. They were survival. They were sanity. But rule number 7 was the hardest to follow. 7. Never deliver to your own name, because it happened. Not often, but enough to know it was real. The first time was in Lubbock, Texas. Caleb received a handwritten envelope placed beneath his windshield wiper. Inside, a single delivery ticket. To Caleb Jordan. Address? Unknown. Instructions, you'll find it. He tried to throw it away. He burned it. But that night, his car wouldn't drive anywhere but the destination. GPS locked. Street signs twisted into nonsense. And when he tried to pull over and walk, his legs gave out, heavy with sleep and static. He woke in front of an old trailer home that he recognized but couldn't place. It was his childhood home, abandoned for nearly 2 decades. But it looked exactly as it had in his memories. Down to the cracked green frog statue by the steps and the dent in the front door from where he'd thrown a scooter at age 9. There was a bag on the porch. And a note. Deliver to self. Recollection required. He refused. Slept in the car. The next morning the bag was gone. But he'd lost 3 teeth in his sleep. No blood. No pain. Just empty sockets. One molar rested in the center console, wrapped in wax paper. That night he started writing everything down. The deliveries became more symbolic after that. One was a package wrapped in red twine with nothing inside. Not empty, but hollow. The box felt heavier than it should have been, like it contained absence itself. He was instructed to deliver it to a public library. The specific shelf was listed, Section 14, 3, Forgotten Biographies. When he placed the box there, a man in a dark green coat appeared beside him. "You're early," the man said, not turning. "I'm not staying," Caleb replied. The man handed him a coin. Solid black. No face.
No ellis.
"Keep this. When you want to remember what you forgot." Then he vanished. Literally.
No footsteps.
No door. Just absence like the box. Caleb kept the coin in his glove compartment for months. Until one night it was gone. Replaced with another. A tooth. Not his. Still warm. The rules grew stranger. Once he was instructed to eat the food himself. He tried to decline. The windshield fogged from the inside with a message. Eat. Or they do.
No clarification.
Just they. He obeyed. The burger was cold. Tasted of copper and cloves. The lettuce crunched like dried leaves. He vomited blood for 2 days. On the 3rd day he received a thank you note. Typed in block letters. "You ate well. The hunger is stayed." He didn't ask whose hunger. Didn't want to know. It wasn't long before the dreams returned. Or perhaps they'd never left. Just hidden beneath waking thoughts. They always began the same. Caleb standing at a doorstep. The house unfamiliar, yet painfully intimate. He holds a bag, trembling. Inside the house someone weeps. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with a kind of exhausted sorrow that resonates through walls. He's told not to knock. But he does. Once. The door opens. Inside is himself. Older. Starved. Eyes gray and sightless. The older Caleb speaks. It gets worse. Then vanishes into flame. He wakes each time screaming. His voice dry as sand. The delivery bag still in the seat next to him. Still full. In Montana, he tried to break the cycle. He booked a week at a secluded mountain cabin.
No Wi-Fi.
No roads. Just snow and trees and silence. The first night was peaceful. He lit a fire. Drank cocoa. Wrote in his notebook. But on the 2nd night he heard a knock. Not at the door. At the window. 3rd floor.
Impossible.
He looked anyway. Mistake. A face stared back at him. Mouth open in an endless scream. No sound. Just the image. He fled the next morning. Drove until he forgot how long he'd been driving. Found himself in Kansas again. delivery bag waiting on the hood. Eventually, the term Zane began appearing in strange places. Graffiti, chalk on sidewalks, carved into tree bark. Once, painted across a dead cow's ribcage in a field outside Elko, Nevada. He asked no questions. But he did notice something new, the symbol, an inverted triangle within a circle, drawn with 3 slashes through the center. He saw it on delivery receipts, on lamppost stickers, on the shoulder of a man wearing a trench coat who passed him in a Walmart parking lot, and whispered, "It's your turn soon." That same night, Caleb's phone rebooted itself. The background image had changed. Now, a picture of himself, asleep in his car, taken from inside the vehicle. No signs of forced entry.
No explanation.
Just a timestamp, 3:33 a.m. He added it to his rulebook. 8. Never sleep after a delivery, especially not at 3:33 a.m. One of the last instructions he received simply said, "Deliver to the threshold. No address."
No coordinates.
Just those words. He didn't understand, until his car drove itself. Literally, steering out of his control, acceleration no longer dictated by his foot. Down roads with no signs, across bridges with no rails, into a forest where no forest had ever been. And at the end, a wooden gate, old, tall, with a rusted brass plate. The threshold. He stepped out.
No bag.
No customer. Only fog. He stepped through the gate. Everything changed. But that story, he hasn't written it yet, because he can't remember what happened there. Only that when he came back, he wasn't entirely Caleb anymore. His voice echoed differently. His shadow moved slower. And every reflection he saw blinked just a heartbeat after he did. He has not delivered since. But he waits, because one day soon he knows the knock will come. And he'll be told, "Time to deliver to yourself." The days no longer passed in a linear fashion for Caleb. Morning and night blurred. He would awaken in parking lots he didn't remember entering, surrounded by receipts and envelopes bearing names of people he couldn't recall delivering to. Time seemed to fold over itself. One week he found himself in New Mexico, the next in Georgia. Sometimes the calendar on his phone jumped forward entire days, sometimes weeks. The only constant was the deliveries. But lately even those had changed. They'd grown personal. One order instructed him to deliver to his old high school locker. It was locked, rusted, untouched for nearly a decade. And yet, the combination written on the note opened it instantly. Inside, a cassette tape labeled simply, "Play Me." He borrowed a cassette player from a thrift shop and listened in his car. The tape contained a recording of his own voice, much younger, stammering through an apology to a girl named Leah. He didn't remember ever knowing a Leah. But when he rewound the tape and listened again, her voice answered, "I forgive you." And then, "Now deliver that forgiveness to someone else." When he opened the glove compartment, a new address had already appeared. Caleb had long accepted the impossibility of his life. The system he was in wasn't technological. It wasn't even magical. It was older, a pattern ancient and recursive, designed not just to bind the delivery man to duty, but to dissolve him inside it. He was no longer delivering meals or messages. He was delivering memories, regrets, guilt, and most disturbingly, identity. One delivery took him to an address in northern Minnesota. There, he met a woman who looked exactly like his mother but aged in reverse. She was in her 20s, though she had been dead for 6 years. Her eyes recognized him, but her voice didn't. "You're the boy," she said, looking past him. "What boy?" Caleb asked. "The boy I should have had. The boy I lost." She reached for the delivery bag. There was nothing inside it. She wept anyway. And when he turned to leave, she said, "You were right. It's not food. It's memory made edible. And I was hungry." Caleb drove for 10 hours afterward, unable to stop shaking. Eventually, he started encountering repeat customers, which should have been impossible. One man in Tennessee had the same name, address, and order 3 times over 3 months. Every time, he gave Caleb the same blank stare, said nothing, and closed the door the moment the bag touched the porch. On the 4th visit, he answered the door in tears. "You're the only thing that still comes," the man said. "Everything else has rotted away." That time, the bag was empty. Caleb stopped checking them after that. But sometimes, when he set the bags down, he heard whispering inside them. Not voices, echoes, of past deliveries, as if the bags remembered where they'd been, and who they'd gone to, and what was lost in the exchange. One night, he found a gas station in Nebraska unlike any he'd seen before. The sign said, "Stop and stay." The pumps were disconnected. The windows were mirror black. But the open sign glowed red, and a bell chimed as he stepped inside. The attendant was a man in a gray apron with no name tag, no visible features. His face shimmered like heat. Caleb walked up to the counter and, unprompted, said, "I deliver for Zane." The attendant nodded once, slow and deliberate, then reached beneath the counter and retrieved a binder, leather-bound, locked with a chain. He placed it on the counter. "This is the route," the man said, voice like gravel. Caleb hesitated. "The full route." The man smiled, teeth like piano keys. "Too perfect, too many."
No.
"The original route." Caleb opened the binder. Inside were dozens of pages, yellowed and crisp. Each listed a name, a location, and a task. Many were familiar. Some were too old to believe. One delivery was marked, July 14, 1933 Berlin. Another, October 9, 1871 Chicago, and one read, March 11, 2020 Wuhan, patient 0. He snapped the binder shut. "You're saying this whole time," the attendant interrupted. "You are not a driver. You are a conduit. The system feeds. The system stores. The system reuses what it is given." Caleb's throat went dry. "What happens if I stop?" The attendant's smile faded. "You don't." He left the gas station in a trance. The binder stayed behind, but in its place, his car now had a GPS screen that couldn't be turned off. It no longer showed maps. It displayed faces, flickering photos of people, sometimes moving, sometimes whispering names, sometimes screaming silently. Each time a face appeared, a delivery followed.
No bag. No envelope.
Just presence. Caleb drove across the country, stopping at locations the GPS directed him to. In each place, he said a single word. Sometimes, forgive. Sometimes, return. Sometimes, forget. And each time, something changed in the air. The wind grew colder. Shadows leaned longer. Street lamps buzzed. And when he checked his rearview mirror, he wasn't always alone. The dream of the threshold returned. But now the gate had burned down. In its place stood a doorway made of bone. Atop it, a carved placard, "Deliverance." Samantha stood beside it, holding a clipboard. "New promotion," she said. "You've graduated." Caleb didn't understand. "You're not the courier anymore," she whispered. "You're the drop-off." He woke up screaming, blood seeping from his ears. A final instruction came days later. Return to 112 Crosshaven Lane. The first house. The first delivery. The instructions were short. Step inside. Accept the tip. Speak nothing. He parked outside the house. It looked the same. Timeless. He climbed the steps. Placed his hand on the doorknob. It was warm. Pulsing. Alive. He opened it. The house was empty. Dust motes hung in the air like suspended stars. A bag waited on the floor. Inside it, a small black box. He opened it. A mirror inside. And reflected in the mirror, a pale blue sedan parked behind his own car. And in its driver's seat, himself, smiling. He turned to run, but the door had disappeared. Only wall remained. A note was pinned to the wood. No contact. No return. No self. You have been delivered. Caleb stepped back from the wall where the door had once been. There was no knob now, no handle. Just smooth, aged wood where an entrance had existed seconds ago. The air was heavy, wet, like breath just exhaled. He was sealed inside the house. Alone. Except he wasn't. He could hear them. Footsteps in the ceiling, moving with deliberate rhythm. Creak, pause. Creak, pause. As though something were pacing. Then came the whispers. Dozens of voices overlapping. None loud enough to understand, yet unmistakably close. Like they were trapped within the walls. Or worse, within him. He staggered backward and turned to flee, perhaps to find another exit, but found himself standing in a hallway that hadn't been there before. It was longer than the house could accommodate. Much longer. Dozens of closed doors lined either side, each identical. Black wood, brass knob, no markings. Except one. Halfway down, a single door had a symbol etched into it. The inverted triangle in a circle, slashed 3 times. The sigil of Zane. Caleb had seen it burned into tree bark, drawn on pavement, tattooed onto the shoulder blades of other couriers. But here, it pulsed with a faint blue glow. His feet moved before his mind agreed. He reached the door. It opened without effort. And beyond it a warehouse. Massive, infinite, like a Costco built on the back of eternity. Steel shelves stacked impossibly high held food containers, delivery bags, envelopes, and jars. Each jar contained a floating object. Teeth, buttons, keys, fingernails, photographs, tongue scraps, wedding rings, locks of hair. Things people had delivered. Things people had lost. As he walked deeper, the lights overhead flickered to life in sequence, illuminating a path for him. At the far end, a desk sat in the center of the space. Behind it, Zane. He wasn't what Caleb expected. Not a man. Not a monster. He looked like an empty coat, hung upright on an invisible hook. A voice echoed from within the coat. Not with sound, but with thought. You've done well, Caleb Jordan. Caleb's mouth was dry. Why me? The coat fluttered. Because you accepted the first rule. What rule? That a job. Once taken never ends. Zane reached beneath the desk and produced a parcel. Simple. Brown paper. Twine. No label. Caleb took it. It was weightless, but something about it burned in his hand. What is it? The final delivery. Where to? Zane's sleeves lifted as if shrugging. You will know. Caleb turned, and the warehouse collapsed behind him like falling scaffolding. He woke in his car, parked in an unfamiliar city, rain gently tapping the roof. The package sat beside him. No label. Still warm. The radio turned on by itself. Delivery window, 33 minutes. Please proceed. The GPS screen blinked to life. An address? 504 Ambridge Way. The name listed? Caleb Jordan. He screamed. Threw the package out the window. It landed in the mud. The rain didn't touch it. Still perfectly dry. Still warm. Still waiting. He drove away. But the address followed him. Every signpost he passed read Ambridge Way. Every hotel clerk gave him a room key for room 504. Every phone call, email, billboard, message, it was all the same. 500 for Ambridge Way. Caleb Jordan. Until finally, he gave in. He drove back to the address. A modest apartment building. 3rd floor, 5th door. His hand trembled as he approached. He knocked. Once, twice. The door opened slowly, and standing inside was another Caleb. Older, weary, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes, the same face, but with something behind the eyes, someone else. The other Caleb reached out and took the package. Delivery confirmed, he whispered. The door shut, and the world changed. He was no longer himself. He became the package, the payload, memories, regrets, shadows. all folded tight inside. Now he waited to be passed along, passed into others, sometimes in dreams, sometimes through reflections, sometimes via the food they never ordered. He wasn't a person anymore. He was the curse, a delivery wrapped in skin and memory. And when you feel that cold breath on your neck during a late-night order drop, when the app glitches, when the customer's name is you, you'll know you've accepted the contract, and you're next. Dom Russo was 5 minutes from clocking out. It had been a long shift, one of those drizzly fall nights where the wind creeps under your collar and every delivery seems to involve the 5th floor of an elevator-less apartment building. His breath fogged the inside of the car as he waited at a red light in South Elgin, Illinois, watching water stream down his windshield like a gray curtain over the world. His Uber Eats app pinged one last time.
Dom groaned.
He'd promised himself he was done. But the order was from one of his usuals, Ravi's Biryani Palace. A short drive, easy tip, probably someone getting one last midnight snack. He accepted it. What stood out was the address, 1962 Amber Grove Way. He'd never heard of it, and he'd lived in Elgin for 15 years. Curious, he pulled it up on Google Maps. No street view, no listed images. The pin dropped in the middle of a residential zone near a wooded buffer, surrounded by perfectly normal homes. But nothing showed up for that house. No real estate records.
No CEO listing.
Not even a satellite outline. He tapped the directions. The GPS hesitated, glitched slightly, then rerouted with a strangely robotic voice. Proceed to basement-level entrance. Follow instructions carefully. He stared at the screen. Basement-level entrance? There were no instructions listed in the Uber Eats order, and he'd never heard of a GPS actually saying something like that before. He tried refreshing. Same result. Maybe it was a prank. Some stoned teenager playing with the app. Still, the food smelled amazing, so he drove. The house was tucked behind a row of cookie-cutter homes. From the road, it was barely visible, set deep into the trees, accessible by a narrow gravel path that scraped the underside of his car with each bump. When he reached it, he paused. It didn't look abandoned. It didn't look lived in. It looked waiting. The house had no lights on. The lawn was overgrown but trimmed at the edges, almost like it was maintained just enough to avoid suspicion. The trees surrounding it leaned toward the structure, as if nature were trying to reclaim it, but being held at bay by some unseen force. Dom stepped out into the rain.
No doorbell.
No porch light. He checked the app again. Still, proceed to basement-level entrance. Follow instructions carefully. That's when he saw it. A small path winding around the side of the house. It led downward toward what looked like a storm shelter door. Partially open, its hinges rusted and the handle covered in damp leaves. Against every instinct in his body, Dom descended. The stairs beneath the shelter creaked with rot. Each step he took sounded impossibly loud in the rain-slick silence. At the bottom, he found a heavy iron door. Unlike the rest of the house, this one was pristine.
No rust. No dust.
A keypad blinked softly to the right of the frame. Then his phone buzzed. Code 12,478.
No sender.
Just the digits. Dom stared at the message, then at the keypad. Surely not, but curiosity and hunger for a good tip overrode hesitation. He entered the code. The door clicked, swung open on its own. Inside was dark, not just unlit, but thick with shadow that refused to give way, even to Dom's flashlight. He stepped in. The door closed behind him with a deep, final thunk. The lock re-engaged. He was inside. The basement stretched out farther than any residential building had a right to. The air was cold and damp, with the metallic sting of old water pipes. The walls were lined with what looked like shipping containers. Dark green metal boxes stacked too high, each with serial numbers. And on the floor, a line of arrows, painted in chalk, pointing forward. Dom followed them. The path twisted and narrowed, leading through a warren of corridors and shadowy offshoots. Occasionally he'd pass an old light bulb flickering weakly, casting his long shadow onto the wall like a grotesque puppet. Then came the voice. Low, mechanical. Place the food on the stool. He jumped. There was no speaker, no device. But up ahead, a dim light illuminated a small room, completely empty except for a wooden stool in the center. The floor was clean. The air felt fresher somehow, like the room had been sanitized. He placed the bag down. Order for... Do not speak. The voice cut him off closer this time. He looked around. Nothing. Silence. He took a step back. Then another. Wait. A door opened on the far side of the room. It had not been there before. And from within came a figure. Not quite human. Not quite not. Its outline flickered. Dom squinted, trying to focus, but the more he stared, the more his brain refused to comprehend it. It was like trying to remember a dream you hadn't had yet. The figure approached the stool, picked up the bag, paused, then turned to Dom, and smiled, though it had no mouth. You have done well. This delivery will echo. Dom turned and ran, back through the corridors, past the flickering lights, up the steps. He pushed at the door. It opened instantly.
No lock.
No resistance, as if it had never been sealed. Outside, the rain had stopped. The night was silent. And the trees had moved. They surrounded the driveway now, closed in like a ring of sentinels, watching. He ran to his car, jumped in, slammed the door shut. When he turned on the engine, the radio activated automatically. A voice. Not his. Not the app. Not anything human. Welcome, Don Russo. Your first drop was successful. Next instructions incoming. Then silence. Dom stared at the dash. The GPS was glowing again. And a new address had appeared. In another state. Dom drove for hours. He didn't remember starting the engine. He didn't remember merging onto the highway or stopping for gas, though somehow the tank was full. He just blinked and found himself 134 miles south of Elgin, parked in front of an abandoned veterinary clinic in a town he didn't recognize. His phone's map now labeled the area as Processing Zone A, Sector 9, though he could have sworn he was somewhere near the Illinois-Indiana border. The new delivery bag was already in the passenger seat. Sealed. Warm. No logo.
No receipt.
Just a handwritten note on top, scrawled in ink so faint he had to tilt it toward the streetlight to read. Entrance is marked by shadow. Deliver quickly. Do not look at the cage. He nearly threw the whole thing out the window, but something in him had changed since the basement delivery. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was compliance. Like something deeper than habit was rewiring him. Dom stepped out into the misty night and walked to the side of the building. There, beneath a broken light fixture, a shadow moved without cause. No tree, no figure, no obstruction. Just a disobedient shadow, wriggling on the wall like it was trying to slither free. The moment he stepped in front of it, the brick behind him shimmered, then vanished, revealing a corridor. The inside was warmer than expected. It didn't smell like an abandoned clinic. It smelled sterile, like a hospital that had been bleached out of time. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls weren't brick or plaster, but covered in a smooth, matte black finish that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. He walked carefully, counting his steps. 7, 14, 21. The hall ended in a large room. A sign hung overhead, printed in letters that shifted when he tried to read them. Like his brain knew the word but refused to acknowledge it. In the center of the room was a cage, covered in canvas. Something moved inside. Fast. Repeatedly. It darted so quickly that the canvas would flutter, then settle again, leaving Dom no clearer than before. Next to the cage, a single pedestal. He placed the bag there as instructed. As he turned to leave, the lights flickered. The figure inside the cage stilled. Then, from nowhere, a voice that came from behind his ears, inside his skull, from the walls themselves. Dom Russo, your next route will cross sectors. You are now a Tier 3 processor. Accept or deny. The words landed in his mind like physical weight. He couldn't speak. He just nodded. The lights shut off completely. When they came back on, he was in his car. The bag was gone. So was the clinic. The sign out front now read, Dusty's Deli, established 1952. Behind the window, a sleepy-eyed man cleaned a countertop, oblivious.
Dom blinked.
And drove. The new notifications didn't come from his phone anymore. They came from inside his windshield. Lines of green text scrolled across it at random intervals, regardless of whether the car was off or running. They began to refer to his drops in code. T3R6S9. Delivered. Asset consumed. T3R7S3. Delayed. Penalty noted. T3R8S1. Instructions pending. He wrote them down in a notebook he never let out of his sight. Every so often, he'd find a page torn out and placed in his glove box with corrections written in red. You missed 3 counts. Memory failure logged. He didn't know who they were, but he knew they were keeping records, and so was he. One night, Dom stopped at a roadside motel. A break. A real bed. Something solid. The desk clerk barely looked up from his crossword as Dom checked in. Room 17. He turned the key and stepped inside, and nearly collapsed. On the bed sat his father, dead 12 years. A man he hadn't spoken to for longer than he'd like to admit even before the heart attack. Hey Dom, the man said casually, as if nothing were out of place. Dom didn't move. Long shift? His father asked.
Dom swallowed.
What is this? The man smiled. Another delivery. This one's for you. Sit down. Dom backed toward the door. Not real, he whispered. His father shrugged. Define real. Did you think this job wouldn't circle back eventually? He pointed to the nightstand. A sealed envelope waited there. Dom picked it up. No address. No name. Just a symbol. The now familiar triangle circle with slashes. This one is special, his father said. A memory package. A what? Your life. Fragmented. Compressed. Sent through you 100 times over. Every drop-off, you've left a little more of yourself behind. Dom's knees buckled. I didn't agree to this. His father chuckled, voice warping slightly. You agreed the moment you took the tip in the basement. The image flickered, and Dom was alone again. Room 17 smelled of bleach and mildew. No one on the bed, but the envelope remained. Inside was a list of names, all his own aliases, delivery accounts he had forgotten he even made, addresses tied to P.O. boxes and burner phones, and at the bottom, confirm termination of all prior identities. New designation, T3 Candidate M. Dom folded the paper carefully, burned it, but the next day, a new driver's license appeared in his wallet. His face, but the name read, Dominic R. Echo. Date of birth, unknown. State, classified. He no longer had friends, no contact, but he started seeing others like him on the road. Their cars marked with stickers bearing the sigil. Their headlights flickering in a rhythm. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code. SOS. They'd nod at each other at rest stops. Nothing more. Dom began to understand. There was a community of couriers now, but not one he could reach, just one he was part of. And every now and then, the GPS would change unexpectedly.
No bag.
No package. Just a location marked, observation. He would arrive. Wait. Sometimes see someone delivered to. Sometimes see someone delivered from. Sometimes watch. Nothing. But even in those empty moments, he felt the static behind his eyes growing louder. He was no longer sure where the job ended and the system began. One day, he woke up and his voice was gone. Literally. He tried to scream. Nothing. Tried to speak. Silence. The system had claimed his language. The next day it returned, but different, slower, waited. Every word he spoke carried instruction. Power, wait, and he began receiving new rules, written on mirrors, on receipts, in his own handwriting. Do not answer the phone on the third ring. Do not remove the tag. Do not deliver where they smile too much. That last one haunted him, because once he forgot. He delivered to a house where the woman smiled too wide, too long. She never blinked. She took the bag and said, "I've been waiting for you." That delivery wasn't logged. Instead, the system marked it, "Candidate compromised. Recalibration required." Dom woke up 3 states away, naked, with a tag stapled to his chest. R3 smile breach. Repaired. He still delivers, because the alternative is silence. And silence means erasure. But he knows now more than ever, he isn't delivering to people. He's delivering to the system itself. And sometimes, he wonders if there ever was a real Dom Russo, or if the basement just needed a courier, and made one from shadow. Dom Russo was no longer afraid. He was beyond fear now. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't numbness. It was a realization that nothing outside the route mattered anymore. He existed between coordinates, between drop-offs, in the narrow folds of unmarked alleys and mislabeled service doors where the system bled through the world like a tumor behind drywall. Each delivery no longer simply moved from A to B. They moved through layers. Time, memory, perception, they had become packaging materials. He wasn't just delivering food. He was delivering weight. Sometimes literal, sometimes emotional, often ontological, concepts wrapped in sealed bags, handoffs that left echoes of forgotten languages in his ears, or left him blinking with the wrong memories. He stopped counting how many bags he'd dropped. He started counting how many versions of himself he'd lost. He noticed the first missing piece after a drop in a ruined church outside Toledo. The task was simple. Place the box on the altar at 4:44 a.m. and leave through the side door, not the main exit. The instructions were very clear. Do not glance at the crucifix. He obeyed. Almost. Just before exiting, he heard it. A single drop of water hitting stone. Dom glanced up. The crucifix was upside down. The figure of Christ replaced by something faceless. And it was watching him. He ran. For days after, he couldn't remember his brother's name. He called his mom to ask. But when she answered, she said, "I don't have a son." Dom was an only child. At least, that's what she remembered. He hung up, never called again. More things went missing. A scar on his left hand he'd had since childhood, gone. A song he used to love, replaced with static when he tried to hum it. One day he looked in a mirror and didn't recognize his own handwriting. He opened his notebook. The delivery logs were written in blocky, foreign characters. But somehow, he understood every word. R4 Phantom, echoed delivery. Recipient unknown. R5 Reverse, drop back confirmed. R6 Subsume, courier replaced. Identity held for processing. Dom circled the last entry. Courier replaced. He began to suspect the truth. He wasn't the original Dom Russo anymore. Maybe hadn't been for some time. He found the first mirror courier in a burned-out Taco Bell in Michigan. He was there for a drop. Leave a bag on the front counter and walk backward to the exit without touching the floor with both feet at the same time. He used hopping. But as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse in the order window's metal panel. Someone else. Not a reflection. Another him. Staring back. Eyes completely white. Smiling. Dom turned to look directly. Nothing there. But when he looked again in a puddle outside, he was still there. Trapped. Mouthing something. Over and over. "They're making more of us." After that, Dom saw duplicates more often. In reflections. Behind him in glass doors. In blurred photos taken accidentally with his phone. They weren't him. Not really. They moved wrong. Smiled wrong. Delivered wrong. One made a delivery to a dead-end road in Tennessee, and the entire zip code disappeared from the USPS database within hours. Another made a delivery to a woman who answered the door twice. The second version of her bit her own face off while laughing. Dom saw that one himself. He drove past the house days later and the lawn was completely covered in teeth. The system began feeding him. Literally. One morning he woke to find a tray of food on his dashboard, hot, steaming, uncannily perfect. No label.
No origin.
A note pinned to the toast. Eat to retain integrity. Decompose otherwise. He didn't want to, but he was hungry in a way he couldn't explain. The food tasted like childhood memories. One bite brought him the scent of rain on concrete. Another made him hear his grandmother's laugh, who he was sure had never existed. The third bite made him cry uncontrollably for 5 hours. After that, he ate everything they gave him. No questions. The next delivery was labeled, Personal Reentry Package. He opened it out of reflex. Inside was a photo, his high school prom date. A name printed underneath, Elena R. He hadn't thought of her in years. He was instructed to place the photo inside a cracked mirror on the 4th floor of a condemned hotel in Milwaukee. The instructions were precise. Do not go before 2:07 a.m. Do not use the elevator. Do not speak to the man at the door. There was no man at the door. Until he was old, frail, weeping. He held a tray with Dom's own face on it, carved in wax, melting. Dom looked away, ran the stairs, placed the photo. The mirror healed, cracks vanishing in a flash of gold. When he looked at the reflection again, Elena stood behind him. Not as she was, but as she would have been if she'd never met him. Happier, healthier, a different life. She smiled, not at him, past him. Then she was gone, and the mirror was just glass again. Dom received a congratulatory message that night. Delivery complete. Memory unburdened. Replacement courier now active. Reentry permitted. He didn't know what reentry meant, but the next morning, for the first time in months, the app reopened. Not the corrupted GPS. Not the whispering system. Just Uber Eats. Plain. Normal. Dom stared at it. A single ping came in. Normal address. Normal name. He accepted. Drove. Felt clean. The house was a white ranch style near a suburban park. The air smelled like autumn. He dropped off the food, took a breath, smiled, then looked at the receipt. Customer name, Dominic Echo. He froze, looked around. Nobody. He ran back to his car. The bag was gone. He hadn't noticed. He checked his rearview mirror. A pale version of himself stared back, seated in the back seat, smiling, eyes completely white. Thanks for the drop, Dom. We'll take it from here. Dom turned. No one there. Just the smell of burning toast. And the sound of his GPS saying, Reassignment complete. Courier status. Pending. Await next instruction. He stared out the windshield. And somewhere, deep inside him, a second heartbeat began to thump. Dom Russo, or what was left of him, stopped thinking of the world in terms of before and after. Everything was between now, between deliveries, between shifts, between layers of himself that peeled away one by one like old stickers on rusted metal. And in the gaps between those layers, them, not the customers, not Zane, not even the system, something older. The things that had been waiting for someone to build a route between their world and ours. Dom was that route now, the courier and the cargo. It began subtly, a house in Missouri where he delivered nothing.
No bag.
No package. The instructions were simple. Knock once. When the door opens, breathe in deeply. Then leave. He did. The air that hit him when the door opened was not air. It was thick, sweet, unreal, a scent like burnt lilac and static. It filled his lungs instantly, and something crawled behind his eyes, settled at the base of his skull, and whispered, You are our way in. That night he didn't sleep, because someone else did in his body. Dom watched from behind his own eyes as he completed 3 more deliveries. The world moved past him in a dreamlike haze. He came back only when the passenger, whatever it was, left. But it didn't leave empty-handed. It had taken something. His memory of laughter. He could recall the sound, but not the feeling, not how it felt to laugh. It was gone. The next assignment had a name, not a location, not a package. Just one word printed across a mirror left in the trunk of his car. Receiver. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a woman. Tall, pale, smiling. She was inside his reflection. Not superimposed. Not layered. Embedded. She spoke. "I've waited for you." Her eyes were his eyes, but brighter, colder. Then the instructions formed across the mirror's surface like steam on glass. Let her drive. He refused. The mirror cracked. Blood ran from his nose. He passed out. Woke up hours later, miles away, his hand on the wheel, blood on his shirt, and the mirror gone. The logs recorded 3 new deliveries.
No receipts.
No memory, but all 3 addresses were later scrubbed from public records. Dom was being used. Each job now came with a condition. Not a payment, not a tip, a sacrifice, memory, emotion, physical things too. His fingerprints were fading. His voice would sometimes echo out of sync. One night he pulled a tooth while brushing. The next morning it had grown back. But it was someone else's. Larger, different color. He didn't ask questions anymore. There was no point. He'd just read the instructions. Then came the reverse drops. Deliveries where the customer handed him something. He wasn't to look inside. Wasn't to ask questions. Just to carry the item to a second location. The first reverse drop came from a woman who answered the door before he knocked. Her eyes were sewn shut. She handed him a paper bag and whispered, "They forgot me." He dropped it off at a warehouse with no windows and a rusted sign that read, "Staff only, do not deliver," nailed upside down. He was chased out of town that night. Not by people. By shadows that moved with shape. With intent. With hunger. He barely made it to the state line. His phone glitched for 36 hours afterward, showing only a timer counting down in red. Rerouting? 0:35:12. He never learned what would have happened at 0. Eventually, the deliveries stopped including bags altogether. Now they used keys. Small, old-fashioned brass skeleton keys placed in his coat pocket when he wasn't looking.
No instructions.
Just doorways. And every time he found a door that shouldn't exist, behind a vending machine, at the back of a storage closet in a rest stop, at the edge of a field where no building stood, he'd try a key. When the lock turned, he'd open it. And deliver. He didn't know what, but the system always thanked him. Drop complete. Memory diluted. Vessel validated. Once, a key opened a door in a moving bus. Passengers didn't notice. Inside was a girl crying into a bowl of dry cereal. She looked up when he entered and said, "Did I order you?" He said, "No," she nodded. "Good. Then I can finally leave." She vanished, and Dom shut the door. The final door before the next escalation wasn't in a building. It was in him. A message appeared on the inside of his car window one morning. "Your chest cavity has been unlocked." He laughed at first, until he noticed the incision. Dead center. No pain.
No scar.
Just a zipper running vertically beneath his skin, beneath the sternum. One he could unzip. And when he did, there was a package inside. Wrapped in veins. Pulsing softly. Alive. The note taped to it read, "To be delivered only when you meet your replacement. Do not open until then. You will know them by the mark." He zipped himself shut. Drove. And waited. Then he saw her. At a gas station in Iowa. A girl no older than 16. Standing beside an old Corolla. She was pale. Tired.
Familiar.
She looked up and nodded. The symbol, triangle and circle with 3 slashes, was carved into her left wrist.
Dom approached.
Said nothing. She walked up and pressed her forehead against his. Then whispered, "Give me the route." Dom reached inside, unzipped, pulled the package from his own chest, handed it to her. She smiled, then walked back to her car. It started on its own. She drove away, and Dom felt himself begin to thin, like fog under sunlight, like a route that had run its course. He got one last message that night, burned into the screen of his phone. "Delivery complete. Courier archived. Thank you for your service. Dom Russo. Preparing next vessel." The words faded. His phone screen turned black and reflected nothing. Not the car, not the sky, not even himself. Dom Russo felt himself thinning. He wasn't dying. He was being processed. It was different. Dying was an end. Processing was a transfer. As each delivery stripped something from him, memories, reflexes, even whole years, he became less a man and more of a system extension, a route that others walked, a protocol embedded into physical space. The moment he passed the package to the girl with the triangle-slashed wrist, he knew his role was nearing its completion. He was no longer delivering. He was becoming the instruction, the route itself. He received a notification on a device he didn't recognize. It wasn't a phone. It wasn't a screen. It was a smooth, black oval that pulsed with internal light like a living lung. The message appeared in the air above it. Final stop, 1962 Amber Grove Way. Do not remember. Do not resist. Rejoin. Dom knew the address. The first basement. Where it all began. Where he had accepted the first tip. Where he had stepped into the system. He drove, though his hands did not touch the wheel. The car moved with purpose, following a route that hadn't existed on any map until this moment. As he passed familiar street signs, they changed behind him. Letters rearranging, symbols shifting, color draining. Reality rewriting. By the time he reached Amber Grove Way, the house had changed too. No longer a structure nestled between trees. It had grown. Tall. Obscene. Towering stories of dark wood and soft pulses of light beneath the siding, like blood behind skin. It breathed.
Dom parked.
Stepped out. The sky above flickered between stars and static. The trees leaned back, opening a path. The basement door waited, wide open, lit from below with blue fire. He descended. One final time. Inside was no longer a basement. It was a cathedral. Endless columns carved from bone. Walls stitched from memories, his memories. Fragments of dreams, photos, smells, laughter. Floating above it all, the system core. A perfect sphere of mirrored fluid, spinning slowly, emitting pulses that made the bones in his legs hum with ancestral recognition. A voice filled the space. Not a voice he heard, but one he had once spoken. "Thank you for your service, Courier Russo. You have passed every threshold, completed every sector, endured every correction. You are now eligible for reintegration." Dom did not speak. There was no mouth. He had none. Just a face drawn on a shape that was no longer shaped like him. The system lowered the core. He stepped beneath it, accepted it. The fluid dripped over him. No pain, just warmth and sound. The sound of 1,000 deliveries echoing through a single name. Russo.rt3. Persist established. Route confirmed. He did not fall. He was unmade and rebuilt. Now, when drivers approach strange houses in forgotten towns, when food apps reroute inexplicably, when someone receives a meal they never ordered with a name scribbled in red marker, it's Dom they follow, the Russo route. It runs beneath cities, through basements, inside reflections. It's not a road. It's not a path. It's a memory, encoded into geography, ritual, and skin. Some say if you listen to static long enough between FM stations at 3:33 a.m., you'll hear the final instruction. Dom Russo has been delivered. You are now the courier. Please proceed to basement level entrance. Follow instructions carefully. Thanks for watching. If your next delivery rings the doorbell at 3:33 a.m., maybe don't answer. Like, share, and subscribe, unless you're already on the list. See you on the next drop.